Are you living on mission with God? We have a lot of young people in our lives, my wife and I do. We have a lot of folks from the ages of maybe 18 to 30 who spend time at our house. They come over, they have meals. Sometimes they come over to work on our farm or to kind of volunteer their hours. Sometimes they come over for Bible studies. We just love to be highly involved in the lives of young folks. And we have a lot of young Christian, young people who come and ask us kind of life advice type of things. Very often we're asked to give our thoughts on the idea of missions, what it means to be a missionary. How does one discern a missionary calling? Most of these people know that my wife and I lived as long-term church planting missionaries on the highlands of the Asian plateaus for about 10 years. We lived there. So people come to us and they ask, how do I know if God is calling me to be a missionary? What do I do if I think God is calling me to be a missionary? It's not always easy to advise these people, but it is a joy to see young people who are interested in giving their hearts and their lives to something significant. They're asking themselves a very important question, which is, how can I invest my life in a way that matters for eternity, in a way that matters for the glory of God? It's a great thing to wonder, a great thing to ask. Missions is an extraordinarily important thing for all Christians to consider and to be open to, even if God does not call each and every Christian into overseas missions. John Piper, again, I've referenced his book, Let the Nations Be Glad, in past video blogs that I've done. But one of the things that stands out to me as I think about that book is that John Piper makes the point that worship is the greatest of all human activities. I can't disagree with that. Of all the things that humans can invest themselves in, worshiping God and appropriately returning glory to Him is the highest of all human activity. And if that's the case, then the second most glorious of all human activities is missions. I'm not saying that everybody has to be involved by going out on the mission field, but everybody needs to be involved. Every Christian needs to be involved in making the glories of God known to the ends of the earth. Maybe your role in that is to support missionaries. Maybe your role in that is to pray for missionaries. Maybe your role in that is to invest yourself in local mission agencies, volunteer your time. Maybe your role in that is to be an evangelist in your neighborhood, in your workplace. Maybe your role in that is to go overseas and be willing to follow God if He calls you there. I used to think that missions was the most important thing for Christians to consider doing with their lives outside of worship. If you can, worship is the highest of all activities, missions being the second highest activity, because missions exist because worship doesn't, as Piper says. Missions exist because there are people out there who don't know that Jesus died for them. That's why we go to the ends of the earth with the missionary calling. But it's not always received well for me to talk about missions the way I do, and to talk about it dogmatically in a way that makes people feel like if they're not involved in missions and they don't know exactly how to be involved in missions or what their place is that God is calling them to, it produces a little bit of frustration. And then we find certain young people who say, God is not calling me into missions. I know that for sure. What I realize is we're actually speaking the same language, but we're using different wording. People who say that I have not been called into missions, I think what they're saying is I have not been called by God to train myself to leave this country and go to another country and another culture to share the gospel and live there for the rest of my life. That is not necessarily what missions is, but that's what people think missions is so often. So I think that part of the disconnect between my saying all Christians should be involved in missions, which I do believe all Christians should be involved in missions, is I need to change my wording a little bit. And this is what I've come to. What does it mean to live missionally? What does it mean to follow God with a missional mindset? If one follows God with a missional mindset, it means they are abandoned to do whatever it is that God asks them to do, no matter what that is. Whether that means going overseas and living in the hardest places, or whether that means working in a high-rise downtown and making the kind of money that frees you to support missionaries at a significant level. That's involvement in missions. And both of them involve living missionally. When I say living missionally, I mean living with an intentional abandon in the service of all that God has called Christians to obey. This is what it means to me to live missionally. And if all Christians will live missionally, all Christians will be involved to one extent or another, or in some role or another, in missions, in fulfilling the Great Commission, in fulfilling God's plan and command to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. Some people disagree about whether or not all Christians have already been called to go and abandon all and go to different places. That's not within the scope of this particular video blog, but I will say that I believe if all Christians will live missionally, missions will be advanced in this world in a tremendous way. PassionLife is a missions organization. PassionLife is also a pro-life organization. We use missions as a platform we use pro-life ministry as a platform for missions in various countries around the world. So it is a very unique organization in that we sit directly at the nexus, if you will, of missions and pro-life involvement. So many places in the world where the gospel is least preached, the abortion rates happen to be very, very high. Some places where the gospel is least reached, the abortion rates tend to be actually very low in some Muslim countries. But the point is, going to high abortion rate countries takes us all over the globe, all over different cultures, tribes, languages, peoples, groups, and nations. We love being on mission with God as we use pro-life ministry as a missions opportunity. Where is God calling you to live missionally? How is he asking you to live more missionally, more intentionally, with more abandon in his service? There is one great human activity, and that is the worship of Almighty God. The second most glorious activity we can be involved in is missions, and all Christians are called to live missionally.